According to Barna, 64% of Christians today think that evangelism is optional. Let's change the stats.
Welcome to GoCast, a podcast designed to inspire and equip pastors and leaders to lead soul-winning churches. We have a mission to go and make disciples. This is GoCast.
Hey everyone, welcome to GoCast. I'm your host, Kelly Stickel, joined by my friend and co-host, Tim Tribble. How are you, Tim?
Doing wonderful, Kelly. Good to be here.
Awesome. Well, today we have a great guest. Again, my friend Jachin Mullen, who pastors Home Church in Red Deer, and we dive into this whole idea of some tips and tricks that he worked with his staff on and did himself on being resilient throughout this pandemic. I remember when COVID first hit, we thought, it was beginning of March, we're like, for sure by Easter, we're going to be out and everything's good. Here we are a year and a bit later, and we're still in this thing. And so leading through this whole season of uncertainty is very disconcerting for a lot of leaders. But Jachin has some incredible insight on and ideas that he gave to his staff that has really led the way with their church in a big way. So let me ask you this question, Tim. Is there anything that you've learned through this season as far as that's helped you be more resilient?
Yeah, I think just this season alone has forced me to just get recreational and start finding how to use the things that really fulfill me in different aspects. So when your comfort zones get torn down, it's a matter of finding new avenues to be able to explore and expand in your giftings. And I think it's just a time for creativity and innovation. So. Yeah,
that's very cool. And it really has been a season of creativity and creativity is always sparked by when things seem to be lacking.
Totally.
We're kind of forced into creativity, which I think this has been a great season in the church for creativity. So when you say new things and creativity, are you talking about your new smoker?
I didn't want to say anything, but yes, it's something. There's something about sitting near smoked meat as it cooks. It's sparks innovation and ideas. I don't know. It's just.
So I've heard, and I've heard it quite often actually from your wife, that you actually watched like a master class on how to smoke meat.
Absolutely, yeah. There's like anything. There's a routine. There's a recipe, and if you don't get it right, you ruined something that could have been beautiful. There's a sermon in there somewhere. I'm sure there is.
I'm sure there is.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that that's really helped you be resilient. For other tips, call Tim. He's got some other great ones. But hey, in all seriousness, this conversation is really helpful with Pastor Jachin, and especially for pastors and leaders, and going, okay, how do we lead our team when we're feeling uncertain, and what do we do, and how do we talk to them, and how do we keep the vision forward and keep them moving ahead? So I think this is going to be a very helpful conversation. So without further ado, let's go to my conversation with Pastor Jachin Mullen. Well, hey, Jachin, welcome back to GoCast. So good to see you, my friend.
It's great to be here, Pastor Kelly. And hi to everybody who's listening and watching.
Yeah, it's been, this has been a year. Probably unlike any that we've ever faced as leaders. You and I, we've basically took over this church just, I think, right about a year after you took over your church, and we have the same likes and dislikes and sports and music and all the rest, all that stuff. And so it's amazing how we all get together and track with one another. But I think one of the most amazing things about this year is our churches are very similar in size and style and all the rest of it. But I think unlike any other year, this year, regardless of church size or experience as a pastor, we're all in the same boat, going through the same thing, and wrestling the same battle. So, what have you learned personally this year? What stood out to you? Because I know God's been talking to a lot of us about a lot of things. So, what stood out to you?
Yeah, well, there's been a lot, Pastor Kelly, and I wanted to say, first of all, it's an honor to serve the Lord with you and many other incredible colleagues across Alberta. Are just doing their best to build the church in this really difficult time that we're not all the way through yet. sometimes it feels like we're through, and then you realize, yeah, we're not through this yet. Still, a year later. There are lots of different things that I've learned, but if I could put it to three things, it would be number one, God is in control.
Yes.
You get through the first one, right? Like the pandemic, and you don't know what's happening, you don't know how bad it is, and you get kind of through that. It's like I felt like this whole thing has been like a fever. It's a virus, but it's been like a spiritual fever too.
Yeah, so true.
Hot, gets really hot, and then it kind of eases off, and then you go through another fever. Just a little bit later, like things that were not expecting to have to go through and work through and deal with, and the polarization of people in the middle of all these things, all the political things,
Yeah.
all the things to do with COVID, and you go through it, but after about four of these major things, you kind of go, God is still in control.
Yeah.
The second thing is God's using this to grow me. That's the second thing.
Yeah, so good.
And so, making mistakes along the way, getting too concerned, even my own worries, my own concerns, my own stress levels through it. Once I got to the third bump in the road, it's like, hey, listen, we can handle this. We can go through this. I've grown in the ability to handle and carry stress and concern about, all the things that are going on.
Yeah.
So that's probably the second thing. And then the third thing is, God's gonna use this and turn it around. And and I just feel like in this season of time, God's used it to grow my leadership and the leadership of our team. And in the middle of it, if we keep our sanity and keep our heads on straight and keep our life with Jesus just stronger than ever,
Yeah.
God opens doors of influence to us, and we're able to minister to people even better. Like as the world's going crazy and we're not, we're able to minister. And that's probably been the things that I've learned and taken away most from this last year.
That's so good. Like, yeah, through this whole year, as you're talking, it comes to mind too. Like God has really, it really used this whole situation in many of us to kind of recenter on what is the most important. And I think we get so wrapped up and we're comfortable with doing church and the way of doing church and all the rest of it. The rug gets pulled out, and then we're going, okay, wait a second. We have to now recenter on, okay, what is most important? What is church? Who am I as a pastor when the pulpit gets taken away for a season and things all shift and change? Who am I as a leader when there's so much uncertainty that goes on? Where am I really leaning in? What am I really trusting in? And all of that is kind of recentering and I think making us stronger. Rather than making us weaker.
Well, for us this year, we started the year with a series called Centered, which was like just Christ-centered life.
Yeah.
Their life centered on Christ. And then the second series was called Build the Fam. Because it's been a difficult time for families. I mean, people are just annoyed with each other. They're stuck in the same house with each other.
Yeah.
Probably marriage would be the number one crisis. It's bigger than I hate to say this, but it's bigger than the COVID crisis is the marriage crisis.
Yeah, that's true.
Having right now. And what happens is we get off Christ as the center, and then soon, our lives fall apart.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of people are right now. And man, if I can just say something right now to everybody, I don't know who's all listening, but whatever is going on in your world, get your life centered back on Christ, get back to church, get back to functioning the best that you can in the church. It'll be amazing how fast your life will turn back around.
Yeah, it's so true.
Centered, right?
Yeah.
Like sports. I mean, we're sports guys, Pastor Kelly.
Yeah, absolutely.
No matter what sport you play, it all begins with your feet.
Yep.
It all begins with your balance and your posture.
Yep.
being centered, right? And so our lives on Christ is the cornerstone, is the foundation to how we live and what goes on in beyond us, into our marriages, into our families, into our businesses. I mean, it just all starts with Jesus.
So good. So powerful, so true. So take us inside your, I don't know, staff meetings, your church. And what's the biggest lesson in this season that you've learned as a team, as a church? What, struggles that you've had or that you've had to overcome, or yeah, just I mean how you've plowed ahead as a church and what you've learned in this season.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we've done everything right along the way.
I don't think any of us have. No.
I think we've made our mistakes, but I think our attitude has been right. And the attitude has been, I've used this saying, whatever comes our way. Like I've just said it to our staff. Hey, whatever comes our way.
Yeah.
We're going to serve it. We're going to outlove it. We're going to outgive it. We're going to outlast it. Your decision in leadership to outlast the problems that come helps you right from the beginning. It's your stance right from the beginning that allows you to, all of a sudden you're creative, aren't you? When you're deciding, when you haven't decided that you are going to outlast whatever comes, it's hard to be creative through it. But when you've already made those decisions, and so you say, well, we're going to outserve this. Well, what does that look like? Well, when the pandemic began, that meant that we got creative on our pastoral teams and systems and how we were going to connect with people. And because in a church of our size, I can't connect with everybody. That's not doable. I'm not going to last. So, setting up like pastors for people, contacting, say, we're going to pastor you through this season, and setting up different ways of connecting with people in virtual small groups, which of course only had a certain amount of time to them because everybody got Zoom fatigue. But just like literally going from creative solution to creative solution to creative solution really started, I believe, with that attitude. Whatever comes our way. And I think it's such a great attitude to have beyond COVID, because life there's more to life than COVID.
Yeah.
There's more tough things that come your way than COVID. Every pastor is going to go through betrayal, COVID or not.
Yeah.
And you have to make the decision ahead of that. Whatever comes my way, I'm serving the Lord. As for me and my house, but even in the context of ministry life, whatever comes my way, I'm going to continue to serve God in whatever capacity He calls me to. And so that's the attitude, I believe, that's fueled different areas of creativity. One of the things that we really, it kind of got rebirthed in our church is just music, which is funny when, saying not to sing and all these things like this. And we're like, well, now's the time to write and minister in different ways. And so a couple of creative things that happened through COVID was, I did a song for Christmas with my daughter.
Yep.
We sent it out on Facebook into our city and just said, hey, we have a gift for you this Christmas. We know this is a tough year. And of course, my daughter, Ava, she's 15 and she's got this sweet little voice, and we just want you to know the love of Jesus. Like, I'm just like looking at her, I'm like, oh, this is awesome. This is the best, right? Send this out to our city. And then we decided to do fireworks on our property for New Year's.
Yeah.
And people drove in, and honestly, it was like our 10-acre property was filled with cars. Highway 2, Highway 2A stopped on both sides of the roads with vehicles. And we had a radio station that was playing, music and things for New Year's that was from our church. And so all these people are listening and they're hearing the gospel over the radio as they're watching these fireworks or preparing to watch the fireworks. And I'm going around, from a distance, waving at people and saying, hey, get on such and such a radio station. And all these people that I've never met are saying, thank you for that song with your daughter.
Wow.
Couldn't believe it. Like people I've never seen in my life. Thank you
Wow.
for your daughter. Thank you for that song with your daughter. And, you know, creativity came in all sorts of ways, such as fireworks, which was hilarious. I
Yeah.
believe the response to a drive-in fireworks for New Year's and how many people were just thankful to do something in the middle of a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to be able to get their kids in the car and go and see fireworks and hear music. And long story short, I believe those ideas just came out of this spirit that said, we're going to overserve.
Yeah, that's so good.
And that's been kind of the framework for our staff and our team.
So good.
And I want to keep that, you know, I don't want to lose that.
I was just gonna say I mean, the creativity in this season. I felt the same thing with our team. Like you're forced in when what is you're normally doing is changed to get extremely creative. And I was like, man, I don't want to lose that. Like I don't want to get comfortable again where we lose that creativity. And I love the attitude that you talked about. You know, whatever comes our way, we're gonna outserve it. We're gonna outlove it. We're gonna outlast it. Man, that is powerful. All right. Now, speaking of which, your church, you guys just celebrated your 49th anniversary, right? Wow.
My parents came 49 years ago with a vehicle and about $200 in their pocket to serve for a month. And they pastored the church here for 37 years. And then
Yep.
The last 12 years, Beck and I have been leading the church.
So cool. Well, congratulations, because that's a big deal. That's 49 years is a big deal. So talk to us. I don't know, next year is going to be got to be a wild party. 50 years, man. Yeah. So talk to us about what the 49 years means to you. Your parents planted it. You grew up in the church, but looking back on the church's history, you know, and what you've learned from the past and how to apply that and learning from its history. To propel it forward in the future.
You know what? First of all, I'm just really excited. Like I have a anticipation for these next few years that I don't know if I've ever had. You know, and like when we took leadership of the church, we didn't have a clue what we were doing really, but we did have like this spirit of faith on us.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes when you don't know what you're doing, I kind of feel that same thing. It's almost like a rebirth. Like Beck and I are in our we will begin our 12th year in September, and so we'll be 12 years in. Church is 49 years in, and you know that 49, 7 times 7. You know the 7
Yep.
the number of completion. Of course, I know how to count by sevens because of football.
Yeah. Exactly. There we go. Now you're talking.
But other times tables I'm not so good at as football. But 49 completion, perfection, and then the Feast of Weeks, of course, is the Old Testament 49.
Yep.
The year of Jubilee 49 plus 1, and then the New Testament. When you get to 50, of course, you're talking about Holy Spirit.
Yep.
Pentecost.
Yeah.
And there's this scripture that Jensen Franklin brought out that just gets me every time when it talks about the number 7, which is in how they built the house of God. It said by a cubit and a handbreadth. It's in Ezekiel. It's just such an interesting scripture to me. And every time I get into anything regarding like the hand of God, when we're talking about the hand of God on your life, this scripture always comes up in my mind where it says, in my house, there needs to be a cubit and a handbreadth. And it's so interesting when you take your handbreadth and you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In your arm is one cubit is 6. It's the number 6. 6 handbreadths.
Wow.
To your end of your hand, which is really interesting that God made it that way.
Yeah.
But but then it says, in my house, it's got to be, I want another handbreadth. I want a seventh. And so 6, it actually is the word cubitus, which means from the elbow. So from the elbow to the end of your finger. But that 7 is the seventh hand. So if you can imagine being in Israel and seeing all these houses that were all built with a cubit, like Noah, God told Noah to build the ark with a cubit, so many cubits by so many cubits. But when it's talking about God's house, if you can imagine walking through Israel and there's all these houses that look the same, but then God's house just has a different dimension.
Wow. Yeah.
And we're to have a different dimension on our lives. And that's what the seven is. The 7 is God's hand on what we can do. And God always used people through the scriptures, right? People that had the 6, they had their abilities, their ways, but God's like, that's not enough. I got to put my hand on what you're doing for it to be eternal, to have eternal value in it. And so, as we go into 49, I'm just expecting the hand of God on our church like never before.
Yeah.
I got on our province, and believing God for just a move of God coming out of this crazy season that we've been in, but moving into a season of the hand of God on our lives. And when you talk about the hand of God, or hands, hands were always made for blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was baby dedication, the first thing you do is bring your baby in and bless them with their hands. And in Hebrew culture, it was a daily father blessing on their children. Of course, when they became of age, there was the blessing that came upon their children. But then, as you go into Timothy and Paul, it was the hand of impartation.
Yeah.
That came upon them. Stir up the gift of God that's been given to you by the laying on of hands.
Yeah.
And so just interesting, like just studying about the hands and what hands mean, and to think that God made this cubit to go, I want to put my hand on what you're doing. And so that's my prayer for our church, for the church in this next season, is that it wouldn't just be because we can God can give us creativity, right? There can be songs,
Yeah.
there can be sermons, there can be curriculums, there can be pastoral care systems. Like we can go through and we can go, God, this is our 6. Like this is what we're doing. But without God's hand on all of that, what is it?
Yeah, so good.
So far, we desperately need the hand of God on us. And amazing when you talk about Elijah, and he's it's barren. It's a barren season. Nothing's growing, nothing's happening. And I love the beginning of that scripture that says, I hear the sound of the abundance of rain. Couldn't see it, but he could hear it.
Yeah.
I feel like that's where we are right now. We can't see it. We're not seeing a revival right now, but I can hear it.
Yeah.
Feel it.
That's so good. And I think that talking with a lot of pastors, you talk with a lot of pastors as well, and talking with a lot of pastors and leaders and those in the church, sensing the same thing, that like we hear a sound and we are sensing, okay, God's hand's about to move in exponential ways, that this is a setup for a major shift in the church. And that's kind of what we wanted this season of GoCast to be on, is going, hey, what are pastors seeing and sensing? Because, it's been a season of uncertainty, but we need to hear the voice of the Lord, need to see the hand of the Lord move. We've exhausted our own personal ability. Now we need that 7th hand, which is so powerful. But you're not just saying it or sensing it. I mean, you're taking a major step of faith. You just announced to your congregation that you guys are going to be launching a massive building project. I mean, this is a big step of faith in this season, COVID, all the rest of it. You're boldly stepping out. Talk to us about that, walking through that decision with your team, yourself, what you wrestled with, and the sense that you're having in stepping forward like this boldly now.
Well, first of all, I just got to say this, like it, anybody who knows me knows, like, I'm not a risk taker by nature.
Yeah.
I'm not. I am.
Well, I would disagree on one level though. I mean, you cheer for the Clippers and the Chargers, so I'm just.
It hasn't worked out so well.
I was like, those are pretty big risks.
No, I'm loyal. I'm loyal. That's true. I'm very loyal.
Sorry, you're saying, yeah.
When it comes to risk, like, you know, if somebody says like, hey, let's do something really fun, you know, let's go skydiving. I'm just like, yeah, you go ahead. You know, I'm not doing it. Or honestly, anything to do with motorsports, like, that's just an injury or death waiting to happen for me. So, you know, like, that, I'm just not a risk. I'm not a risk taker. Like, you know, you sit down with the people that are helping you with your investments, and you take the survey, right? Are you the guy that, you know, wants to risk it all, or are you the guy that goes long term? I'm the long term guy that doesn't risk much. I'm fine to just keep going and be steady. And, you know, that's my nature. That's just kind of who I am.
Yeah.
And I never would have thought that we'd be pulling the trigger on a building project when we're not even through COVID yet.
Yeah.
It's just, it doesn't make sense in so many different ways. Like, why would we be doing this? You know, we probably are 75% back in church attendance. You know, just like all of the signs of the economy, everything.
Yeah.
And yet we're at this spot where in the church there's a spirit of faith, and we just are, like, I'm probably, out of our team, I'm probably the most hesitant out of everyone, and yet I feel like it is the time for us to move ahead.
It's amazing.
And so, you know, our church has given for several years to get to this point where we're able to make this step. And we just feel like this is the time for us to make the move. And so we're taking this, and it is a huge step of faith for just a step of faith. You know, I was asking my parents who, you know, bought this property. It's prime land, you know, right on the Highway 2. And, you know, I was asking them, and because I know what they went through just to get this building on this property. And I'm like, so how does this compare to the step of faith you took? And my mom's like, this is a bigger step of faith than you took. And that just seriously made my Adam's apple, like, go up and down like a bunch of times. I'm like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
But we're so excited about it. We feel like, I'll speak this into existence. What we feel is, we feel like God's called us to build something that's world class in Red Deer, Alberta, of all places. But we feel like it's the first fruits of many great churches and church buildings that are going to come up across Canada.
So good.
And I know I can't explain that, except for I feel like it's just what God's put in my spirit, God's put in my heart, is that, you know, across Canada, especially in spirit-filled churches, there isn't a lot of signs of, you know, great churches and church buildings that you go, wow, that is something amazing. And we just feel like God's put that in our heart to do. And to be the first, I believe, to be the first of many. This isn't about home church, you know, doing this or that. I believe this is the first of many great churches for this, what I believe is the end time harvest that's going to come. We don't know how long that is. I don't know if Jesus is coming back in 20 years or 50 years or 100 years, but we believe that this is something that we're called to do for the end time harvest. And for us in Red Deer, you know, this will give us the ability to grow to, you know, 8,000 to 10,000 people just in our community here.
So cool.
Well, I know that's a crazy thing to even think of at the size that we're at now, and in COVID. But that's what we're believing for.
It's so good, and it's so inspiring too to be able to take not just say, "Hey, I sense the greatest season of the church is coming," or "I sense God is going to break through," or "I sense it's going to be strong." And like all of us pastors, we're sensing God's up to something, but at the same time, then we look around and going, is the congregation we had going to come back? Is what's going to happen? Like, what are we going through? Are the finances going to bounce back? What happens? Like, and are we going to be able to survive that? And yet to be able to take that giant leap of faith and plowing ahead in the midst of uncertainty is very inspiring. So, man, and it is, I believe with you that it is a first fruit of something big for the church in our province, country, around the world as well. It's great.
I really believe that, faith steps are so important.
Yeah.
And for pastors that are watching and listening, it's a personal faith step, but then there's also, then there's the corporate faith step. And
Yeah.
Beck and I have chosen to do both. Like literally take the largest faith step personally that we've ever taken. And to lead our church in taking a faith step.
So good.
But then also as a church to take a faith step and trust God and move forward and see what God will do. So if anybody wants to help me with the faith step, you're more than welcome to.
That's awesome.
We're believing for some miracles,
Yeah, it's good. Well, that's very, very exciting. You have a incredible pastor's heart and love connecting with other leaders. So talk to the pastor listening right now who's contemplating their own path forward for themselves, in ministry, personally, do I continue? I think many of the older pastors that I've been talking to, and I'm sure you're finding this as well, are contemplating, do I have enough energy to kind of restart? This almost feels like a replant. Do I have enough energy to do that? Is it me that wants to do that? The younger pastors are struggling with, the fear, the uncertainty of, you know, having to restart, had momentum at one point, and it's kind of waned a bit now and kind of discouraged in their own right. So what advice would you give to pastors listening based on what you're hearing from pastors you're talking to?
Well, before I get to any advice, I just want to say, pastors are so needed right now.
Yeah.
You're just so needed. And you may not hear how needed you are, but you're so needed. At this time, you're crucial to just people's lives. And I know for myself, I've had some of those same thoughts, man, maybe I shouldn't do this. This is going to be really hard. This is difficult. Are we going to make it?
Yeah.
Definitely had all those thoughts along the way. But I believe what's kept us is knowing that God called us.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard anything else from the Lord besides that we're called here at this time, and if God would have to speak very clearly for us to make it move, because when you're living in the calling of God, the calling of God doesn't mean that it's not going to come with incredible challenges, persecution, betrayals, you name it along the way. But when you're called by God, ultimately, it always just comes back to my relationship with Christ and that He called me.
Yes.
That's what it always comes back to, and I've had the moments too where, just like Peter, God's saying, do you love me? Feed my sheep.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You love me? Isn't it amazing though how our ministry really at the very core is fueled by our motive of love for Christ Himself?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you love me?
Yeah.
Once we get our love for Christ in the right place, it's amazing how all of the other things of ministry life start to kind of take their place and that's what's scary. We've been talking about as pastors, like, hey everybody, don't get secluded, don't isolate, all this. What about us?
Yep.
Like, are you as a pastor isolating, being secluded, withdrawing from people, even because of your concern for whether they're going to stick around with you or not? Are you withdrawing? Like, I'm concerned about that with pastors. That all of a sudden withdraw and all of a sudden we're in a healthy place.
Yeah.
I want to encourage every pastor to reach out to somebody to get prayer. I reach out to my pastor, but I'm also reaching out, to you, Kelly, and other pastors, and just connecting. Just, hey, let's pray together. Let's connect.
Yeah.
Making sure that I'm sending out a text when I'm not doing so well on a Monday or whenever it is that maybe I'm struggling. Something happened, or it was a weaker Sunday. Sending that text and connecting.
Yeah.
But what was the other part of the question?
No, it's just advice for pastors, like the going through that stuff. And I think what you're saying is so good, right? I mean, it's about connection again, coming back to the foundations again, and our relationship with Christ. That we say that so flippantly. I think we say it so often as pastors that we don't really anchor ourselves in that same thing and going, okay, it's not about what ministry looks like. It really is about relationship. We get to heaven. He's not going to be concerned about what size our church was before we got there. He's going to be concerned about the relationship and the connection with him. So re-anchoring there, but also not losing that connection with, and I like what you're saying is like, don't lose the connection with other pastors. Sometimes it's just encouraging it just to talk with other pastors and going, man, I'm feeling this way, and have them say on the other side, I'm feeling the same way. I don't know what else to tell you, but it's just suddenly a relief in going, okay, I'm not the only one battling, being discouraged, or I'm tired. I think is probably one of the biggest words that I've heard from pastors. I'm just tired. Like, it's exhausting leading on uncertainty.
I called a friend of ours. It was probably right in the middle of everything that was going down, and I told him that, and I said, what? I said to him, yeah, I'm just really tired. And he said something that was really good for me at that point. He said, we take tired very seriously. And I went, oh, because maybe I didn't take it seriously enough. He goes, you can make the same bad decisions tired as you can drunk.
Wow. Yeah.
That hit me. Or, you can make some really bad decisions tired. And I think that sometimes the enemy comes and plays in on tired too, and puts these thoughts in us, and discouragement, depression comes in on tired, like all these different things. You have and I know pastors right now are doing multiple services. I get done Sunday and I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
After 4 services, I am exhausted. And this week, 4 services. Did a pastoral situation that was a critical situation, and then did something online, and I got done at 7:00 on Sunday. I was exhausted.
Yeah.
And the enemy can work in on that exhaustion and come in and sow negative seeds, maybe about something that you said, or maybe about, is this ever going to turn around?
Yeah.
And come back to what it was, let alone what it really is called to be. And the enemy works in on tired.
Yep.
And really got to guard against that. And we were lacking too in things like that we used to attend, such as conferences and things like that, where we used to get refueled, and now we got
go away on vacations. We can't leave anywhere now.
Yeah. It is a real challenge.
It is, yeah.
And so I'm looking forward to the day when we can do those things.
Exactly. So what do you do? Like, so what, I mean, state of discouragement when you're tired, and to the pastor that's feeling that, like, what's something practical or something that you've done that's kind of rejuvenated you and it gives you life again?
Well, I've changed my schedule completely.
Hmm.
As a schedule changes on you, you got to change your schedule.
So good.
And we that was probably one of the first things that we did. And then there's a slight adjustment period to that. But now my week goes Sunday to Thursday. That's
Okay. Yeah.
Thursday night we record our online services, and actually our Thursday night service is like it's packed. We can't have anything else come Thursday nights, which is really cool and a great idea for pastors right now, especially going into summer and going into spring.
Yeah, because people will leave for the weekend, right? But they can still they don't have to miss church.
It's been great for our church.
Yeah.
One of the highlights of one of the things that's kind of come out of COVID is a Thursday night service. And Thursday and I'm off Friday and Saturday. That's what life looks like for us. I work a very hard Monday to Thursday. It's a good week, but then I'm back ready, and I really like too. One of the things that's come out of it is like Thursday. I'm ready for Thursday night, preach Thursday night, and Friday and Saturday that word just kind of like continues to have to sit. And by the time I get to Sunday, man, I'm ready to rip for Sunday.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I mean, there's a key to that as well, though. I mean, by taking Friday and Saturday off, I don't know if you're probably like me, but you have one day off, and then you're back at it, or you usually take it like a Saturday off or something like that, and then Sunday's coming. Your mind is still dealing with what happened in the week and projecting what's going on the next week, and you're not really recreating because your mind is still occupied there. By having that second day like that allows you to go, yeah, I can leave that alone and kind of recreate and rest.
Yeah, finding some things to do physically is important.
Yeah.
I ran a marathon a few years ago.
Yeah.
So I can't even believe I did with these stubby little legs that I got. But ran a marathon, but I just decided, I'm going to start a run club. So I started a run club. It's short distances.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of people that have joined me in that are, some of them are walking, some of them are running, but just something that you can do that is consistent, that's also connecting with people in some way, even though it's, online and stuff. It's like, you got your little chat and everybody's checking in saying they got their stuff done. It's just
that's very cool.
And so your own health is so important. The health of your marriage. Beck and I have we have kind of dates that we plan. Personally.
Yeah.
Also, we're getting away here for a few days. Just going to Canmore for a couple of days.
Nice.
You just have to look at all the different areas of life and make sure that you're healthy. And, there's that scripture that talks about how it's a great thing to aspire to be an elder or a leader. And then it says, you gotta be able to take care of your own house,
Yeah.
And so, making sure that you're doing fine, your kids are doing fine, your spouse, you guys are doing fine, your marriages as well. And at the top of that, Pastor Kelly, for me, and I have to say this because I really believe in it. At the top of that is an accountability to my pastor.
Right.
And that's just a vulnerability to say when you're not doing great. And obviously, I got great friends like you, and that, in a peer way, we have connection and relationship.
Yep.
Share what's going on in our lives. But accountability is so huge. And I find so many people say that they have a pastor, but they never talk to them.
Yeah.
Never tell them what they're really going through.
Yeah.
And or maybe it's only pastor when it relates to church stuff, but not, personal
Right.
stuff. And I've found that has been huge for Beck and I, to be able to call, text, and I check in about every 10 days with my pastor and just say, hey, things are well, things are good, or hey, I got a few things that I got to run by you. And that has been huge for us.
That's awesome. It's so good. I think the accountability, but also what you're saying too, like when we're tired, one of the first things that really goes is our disciplines, right? Whether that's, the eating, the workouts, the schedules, like when you're tired, it's a lot easier to walk away from that. But in reality, what I'm hearing you saying is that when you're tired, I mean, it's the disciplines that you got to kind of focus in on again, because they're the ones that are going to recreate you and strengthen you to be able to get back on your feet. So I know that did it for me. COVID and all the schedules changed, everything changed, and I realized, man, yeah, the COVID-15, 19 pounds or what, yeah, that started to affect, and I was like, man, and it was about in the fall. I was like, okay, enough is enough, and I doubled down on some of the disciplines and began working that, and it's amazing how I was too tired. I didn't want it. I didn't feel like it, but on double downing that, it bounced back a whole lot quicker, and then suddenly felt my legs again and going, okay, here we go. Let's go, because you start taking care of yourself. So that's real good.
And like some of those habits that I've been encouraging our church on the Build the Fam series. There's the habits that people have right now that are horrible habits, like just the Netflix till 4 a.m, and talking to young people that have just like their habit is just staying up super late playing video games, and I find out their parents are watching Netflix till 3 a.m, and you wonder why you feel horrible is because your habits are just off. And so I know this is simple stuff, but maybe it helps somebody. Is like, even as I started to run, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go to bed earlier.
Right.
It's like this most simple thing, but I would like to stay up late. That's kind of the way that I'm kind of built, But it's like I'm gonna put some disciplines in my life that are going to guard my health, because the kingdom because the kingdom is the priority. I'm going to do what is needed for my own health to lead well.
Absolutely. So good. Man, this has been so good. Thank you again so much for coming on and discussing this with us. And I know it's been helpful for a lot of pastors. Is there anything that in closing that is on your heart that you want to share we haven't talked about, or a revelation you've been chewing on, or something that you just feel like you need to share with those listening?
Well, I mean, there's lots of sermons. We're all preaching a million sermons right now. Lots of things. I've been really dwelling on this 49 thing and this 50 thing these next 2 years. To me, just something on it for our church. But I pray, if there's anything that I could pray, is that there would be a rebirth in every leader.
Yeah.
In this time, a re-energized spirit and life, and even prophetic flow of life that would come back into leaders, where hearing the voice of God and moving forward with the voice of God would become so real to every leader and every pastor.
Yeah.
We're just, I think one of the concerns I have is that culture invades church rather than church invade culture.
Wow.
That's one of the concerns I have. And I think we have to know that we're different and be okay with that.
Yeah.
God made us as 7s, not 6s. So,
yeah.
Be different, be okay with that. And if that means that you're doing some things that people would say, I can't believe you're doing that right now, maybe that's a good thing. Like maybe that's like a sign that that something different is happening in your life and through you and through your church. And that's what I pray. I pray that for our nation, Pastor Kelly, for your church, for all the other churches. I pray that we become a sign and a wonder and a light in this time.
Yeah. Amen.
And so I pray that God opens doors for you and for other pastors that are listening, simply because something on us. And I think that's the thing to guard, is like we're guarding our own life, but then like stirring up the gift of God within us.
Yeah.
There's so much that God has for us to do in this next season of time.
Yeah. Amen. I receive that. And I know those pastors, leaders listening receive it as well. I believe, like you believe, that the best is yet to come for the church, and we're just getting started. And I think we talked about even with disciplines and getting back our energy back. I think there's, you watch athletes, and we're always into the sports. They're training as hard now in the off season, probably harder now in the off season than they would be mid season, and in preparation for what's to come. And I really feel like there's something shifting, something's changing in the next year or two, but something is coming this fall. And I think right now, for us as pastors and leaders, this is the time to train, to prepare, to get ready for the next move of God, whatever that looks like. But I think the best is yet to come. So thank you so much, Jachin, for joining us today. It's been awesome. Such a pleasure to see you again, my friend. What a great conversation with Pastor Jachin. Man, there's so much in there. I just love that, how bold he's been in this season and taking on like a building project and massive things, despite when everybody's kind of, slowing down and focused on just maintaining. He's going all in, and I love that. It's very, very builds a lot of courage and man, inspiring for sure. What stood out to you?
Yeah, I think the word inspiring is exactly right. So to have everything like that going on and still be able to deliver vision to your team. And I love what he said, that, whatever happens, we're going to outlove it, outlast it, and outserve it. Like what a defining vision for just pushing through with this next season coming up. So that stuck with me.
I love that saying. I mean, it's something that this has been a whole bunch of season of curveball. So at the time of this recording, I know there's many of our friends that are watching that are in the States, and things are opening up for you guys. Here in Canada, we just got locked down again. And so here we go. I think this is round 3 or 4. We've lost count. But just that attitude of going, okay, here we go again. Is this ever going to end? Yeah. But having that attitude of no matter what comes our way, we're going to take it head. We're going to outlove it, outlast it, outserve it. So good. We want to continue the conversation with you. And we want you to be very much a part of the conversation, not just listening or observing or watching these podcasts. We want to hear from you. What have you done in this time that's worked for you and your team? Man, continue the conversation. Let's keep talking. We'd love to hear from you. So how do people connect with us?
For sure. You can find us at GoCast.ca. You can also listen to the podcast on any major podcast playing platforms.
Yeah, and connect with us on social media as well. We would love to hear from you and get to know you and your ministry more. Well, next week we have another great episode coming with Pastor Brandon Stewart, who leads the organization Leading Second, also is a key leader for Team Church, which is conferences, and he has conversations with pastors and leaders all over the world, regularly connecting with them and their teams, and his insight in the conversations he's been having with pastors and leaders is very insightful, and I think is going to be very beneficial for all of you. So here is a clip from next week's conversation with Pastor Brandon Stewart.
On a personal note, one of the things that's driving me and drives my passion for Leading Second is the fact that our churches went through trauma this last year. I think one of the things we realized, my pastor would say that if he was talking right now, is that we had people in our churches that were assembled but not aligned. Oh. And so when people have exited this year, in many ways, it was the people that weren't really with us. They were in the room, but weren't really with us, in some ways. And but my passion really got activated last year when I started realizing that wasn't for the 2 times a month church attender. that was all the way up the ranks of the team. I mean, I have never had a season where I had to coach so much tough transition in churches and so many tough staff, exits. And it was heavy at times. It was really crazy, the amount of transition and the nature of transitions. And people in the second chair and on your team and teams everywhere took a hit this last year. And so our ministry, it felt more like an emergency room the last year rather than an outpatient clinic.
Well, can't wait for next week with Pastor Brandon Stewart. You're not going to want to miss that. Thank you again for joining us. And before we go, Tim, I got a very major question for you. What is on the menu tonight? What have you been smoking this week?
Last night was smoked wings. When I find enough time, I'm going to attempt the almighty brisket. Yeah, I think at some point. So
awesome. And I still have not yet had a sample. So just saying, not that we're going to bring that up anymore. But it's all good. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of GoCast. We hope you feel inspired and better equipped to take your community for Christ. Make sure to subscribe to receive each new episode as it's released. Let's go and break the stat together.